Well, it's good to see you guys again. You really keep hanging in there, and I'm really glad that you are helping us get to our next segment, because the next segment on our chart takes us into the area of reasoning competencies. And the reasoning competencies work much better as a set of activities if we've laid down the foundation that we've already laid down, as far as we have a methodology. We're going to project manage our lives. We're going to keep looking for improving our ambitions in our lives. We're going to promote ourselves. And now we're going to learn the tools that will really make a difference. And while you take a look at that systems thinking cityscape, I'm just going to read a little bit of the input for this particular story. Okay. Systems thinking. A systems perspective on social matters that illustrates the interdependency and mutual support among the personal, organizational, and community subsystems within which we learn, develop, and strive for success. And that's the key. This is the one element that drives home the idea that we are interconnected, and that interconnection is what makes us much more powerful if we can make it work for us. The systems thinking competency helps us develop a broader, more integrated outlook and to expand the contextual environment of our thoughts and decisions. The use of systems thinking inspires us to be integrative thinkers and discover opportunities to synthesize our learning for better understanding. Systems thinking, which we have noted on our charts as ST, and pattern recognition, which we will talk about next, combine to assure effective situational learning, which is our goal, a major goal in this program. So with that, we'll move on to the first slide. And once again, just a reminder, always looking for yourself on which line are you riding on. Are you on the green line yet? Depending upon your age and your experience, is the green line starting to call you, or are you riding the blue line? Are you just going to go with the crowd, or are you going to try to find a way to break loose and take care of yourself? And on the chart here, we've now moved into the interdisciplinary reasoning competencies. And then the key thing there, that this is the first stage of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stages that are all interlocked and work together. They do have some cross and repeat capabilities, but the best way to understand it is the sequence in which they work when 5 goes to 6, goes to 7, goes to 8, and goes to 9. That pattern, cyclical pattern of behavior, sets up a great learning capability. And so, where are we, where are you on this planet? So the question is, how often do we even think of ourselves as a dot somewhere in this absolutely amazing thing called a planet? How does it work? Why does it work? What depends on whom? Who works on whom? How does this damn thing work? And if you watch some of the scientific movies that they provide and documentaries, you always keep finding that there are extraordinarily hard to understand complexities here that makes this planet just operate. And it's the only place in the universe that we are aware of that could possibly actually work together, and it's totally interdependent. And so if I were to say to somebody, you're too narrow in your thinking, you're thinking only about yourself, you're thinking only about your job, or thinking about only your country, could you see that that could be a very slam to a person's ability to think correctly if they think that everything is focused on them? So the difficulty here is to take time in life and free ourselves from all the things that make us think that everything revolves around us, and not recognizing that everything that goes on around us is really in charge of us more than we are in charge of it. That's a major breakthrough in our thinking, because you are in a system. You're in the personal, the organizational, the community, and the societal system. And those who can optimize their relationship in each of those systems are more likely to be better knowledgeable, better skilled, and more opportunistic when opportunities come by. But it's not easy, given the day-to-day work that we have, to remember this when we're just living from day to day trying to get our work done. Another way of looking at it is this spread, in that I think it's nice from the standpoint it shows us more of the earth in greater detail, but what it does in this particular one is list below it the social, political, economic, ecological, technological, and geographical connectivity, each of which can be discussed in great detail independently. But if you really want to understand them, you have to put them together. In other words, you can't really understand what goes on from a social point of view with human beings unless you understand the context of the political situation they find themselves in and the economic situation they find themselves in. And if the ecology is poor where they are, the chances are the economy is poor also. So good people with good motivation might go nowhere in life simply because the factors piled up against them are just too much to deal with. And so it means that when we think about ourselves and how we move ourselves forward, every time we're in a meeting or making a decision, there could be a force that is trying to drive us in a different direction than where we want to go. We just haven't recognized it. And you recognize it when you discipline yourself to open up and have a conversation where you say, does anybody have some ideas that are outside of what we're talking about, that might be sneaking up and we don't even recognize it, but it's there, and it's the elephant in the room and no one is daring to bring it out. And if that's true, then you're going to have a hard time making decisions that make any sense at all. Now, this is just a notional graphic. It doesn't have any relationship to anything in particular that you might deal with, other than what it does, it allows me to talk about systems integration, of where if you put this in the middle, you can say the social system, the organizational system, the community system, and the societal system that we started off with as part of our model can be drawn in such a way where there are spaces to be filled with other things that might be in play. Because we do know that when we do that, and we think of what are the other things other than those titled this way that might be in play? Well, do you believe that maybe how commerce is done in a society or New York City might make a difference on, or have a difference as far as the transportation that's needed for the kind of commerce that you need to do? How about your religion? Do people of certain religions in certain areas expect a certain kind of behavior or perspective on things and they demand it from others like them? What about their communications, and what do they expect as far as communications? And do they all use the media the same way, or do they all use the internet the same way? And if the religion changes, does the culture change? So what we can say that within these boundaries, this just opens up all the different subsystems that have an interplay amongst the major ones we've already identified as our domains, and those are just some of them. Now that we see that the personal organizational system can set the tone for a relationship, we see all these subcultures and sub-players in line. But when they start operating, what we do know is that there are other factors that come into play. We wouldn't call them subsystems. We would call them, they are things like uncertainty and ambiguity. The fact that people who are dealing with anything today never know enough information about what they're doing to have for sure the complete answer. So what happens is you're dealing with uncertainty and ambiguity, which makes everything in here questionable. Because if you don't know what the culture is and it's different than what you think, or you don't know that if the commerce is the right commerce for the transportation that's available, or that the particular religion of the area will not tolerate certain kinds of thoughts, then what happens is you can't make this work in a synergistic way anyway. On top of that, there are unanticipated consequences that people have to deal with because we almost never know all the people, all the players from all the angles, and they surprise us all the time. We have chaos where things are totally out of control, and we're out of control to such a degree that people are giving up because everything is so complex. You can't get your mind around it. So even though you think you understand all these players, this still goes on. There's a term today we try to use when we come up with solutions like what I've been trying to explain here. It's called complexopacity. Complexopacity is building the capacity in your mind to have the tools ready to go. When you see there's a need for them, you can use the thinking tool or the decision-making tool that busts through the complexity. You don't get stymied by the complexity. You have the fact that there are knowledge limits, that people just don't know all the things they need to know. You have what you call feed-forward effects, which means you start doing something now and something that you had planned in your plan does not come out at all like you had planned. Tipping points has been very popular, and that what happens is something's been going on for a long time and it looked like there was a need to change, but it didn't happen until somebody or something did or said something that blew the whole thing out of the water. And tipping points occur when everybody's agreeing to something in the system and somebody with more influence, more talent, more skill says, I think we should do it a different way because this is what I want to see. Well, when the guy with the gold starts to spend the gold the way he wants, that's the tipping point for what anybody else wants. My point on it is that open systems is where we live. This is called the open system dynamic. And that how is it that we even survive most of the time dealing with this reality from the time we get up to the time we go to bed? This is happening in this world. And it's mostly happening where there's fast-paced cities and places like that, as opposed to rural areas where people live a slower life with fewer influences. Also, there's a whole group in the futurist world, quite influential, particularly here in the Washington, D.C. area. Awful lot of well-heeled, smart people participate in this thing called the World Future Society, where they study this stuff in great detail. And in a lot of similar categories, here's commerce and humanity, which would be the social, governance is here, and earth and science and technology. They put out these reports and group work to talk to us and give us some suggestions of where the future is. My own experience, having been a member of this organization, you might think you're well fed and understood on particular concepts. You get into some of these meetings where people are making a lifetime, like learning without schools, a contrarian view. I've never learned hardly anything formally that gave me a recognition if it wasn't in a school. So we got people who are saying schools are the problem. You got to let people learn where they learn, by whom they associate with. Well, how could you run a society by saying everybody's equal here, everybody knows whatever they need to know, and they'll follow the laws that they think apply to them? But in the world of systems thinking, you can add factors and you can take factors away. And you know, if you look at the internet probably has as much false information on it as it has true information. So therefore, if you're an internet consumer, and that's the only place you consume your, quote, knowledge from, you're in big trouble because half the things you're learning might be absolutely wrong. And that is a concern from a systems thinking point of view. In any case, we always get back to, as an individual, where do you decide that we're either in sync or not in sync with what's going on from a systems thinking point of view? And when do we have to decide that we are being persuaded that what we used to think is what we don't think anymore, and then have the courage to say, I'm going to let my mind follow what I now believe, which means I might have to leave what I used to believe in. We see this particularly with the areas we don't discuss too much in this program, which happens to be in religion. and in areas like politics, because there's always a minority of people who are trying to find their life, their meaning, their fulfillment by associating with the right foundational group. And if you can get on the right side where you're most popular, you know, if you live in a Catholic country or in a Catholic state and go to a Catholic school, if you're asked which version of the Bible or this or that, you have the answer, right? But try going down to Mississippi where the Church of Christ rules, or something like that. I mean, I don't like to get into religion because it's controversial, and the same thing with politics. But we have to know that we are creatures of politics and religion. And that's how we live within the system. If you leave that system, you get out of it, you're not included anymore. And so what each of us has to decide, what are we tolerant? How tolerant are we when it comes to defining ourselves and how we want to be? Do we always have to be included, or could we be excluded, and that could be okay with us? Where is freedom? Where is independence if people can't allow themselves to be excluded from the primary group and not berate themselves for not being accepted? It's a problem. And always knowing that, what does that mean? And if any of us is in tremendous turmoil, chances are we have some big decisions to make. You know, it's just like whether you're a drug consumer or a smoker or an alcoholic, if something's got to grab a hold of you and you're starting to change your thinking, it's not going to want to let go. Okay, thank you very much. See you next time.